We often hear people talk about freedom, but what does it truly mean? Is it simply the right to do whatever we want? Or is there more to it? Does freedom come with responsibility? And if so, how much are we willing to give up for it? In the world today, freedom is one of the most powerful concepts, yet it's also one of the most misunderstood. Some say freedom is about having choices. Others argue it's about living without any restrictions. What if I told you that freedom isn't just about doing whatever you want? It's far more complex, and in many ways it's tied to our moral obligations, societal rules, and even our own self-discipline. Today we're going to explore what freedom really means. We'll dive into the history, different philosophical perspectives, how freedom interacts with our responsibilities, and how we navigate it in our modern world. Stick with me as we break down this crucial idea and figure out how it affects our daily lives. The history of freedom, ancient Greece, and the foundations of freedom. In ancient Greece, freedom was more than just a political right. It was an essential aspect of the human condition. Philosophers like Socrates argued that true freedom wasn't the ability to do anything you wanted. Rather, freedom meant the ability to live according to reason and virtue. For Plato, freedom was the pursuit of truth and wisdom. He believed that only through philosophical inquiry could one achieve true liberty. On the other hand, Aristotle took a different approach. For him, freedom wasn't about individual autonomy, but about participating in the community. True freedom meant being an active member of a well-ordered society where citizens contributed to the greater good. The Enlightenment, shaping modern freedom. Fast forward to the Enlightenment era in the 17th and 18th centuries, when philosophers like John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau reshaped the way we think about freedom. Locke argued that natural rights, the rights to life, liberty, and property, were fundamental to freedom. He believed governments were created to protect these rights, not to infringe upon them. Rousseau, however, took a more radical stance. He argued that freedom wasn't about simply doing whatever we wanted, but about following what he called the general will. He believed true freedom comes when individuals submit to collective decisions made for the common good. This concept has sparked debates on whether personal freedom is always compatible with societal obligations. The rise of modern libertarianism. By the 19th century, thinkers like Friedrich Hayek and John Stuart Mill began to champion individual liberty in new ways. Mill, in his famous work, On Liberty, argued that individuals should be free to do whatever they want as long as their actions don't harm others. This idea of harm principle became a cornerstone of liberal thought, influencing political systems around the world. But as freedom expanded in the modern world, questions arose. Can society allow complete freedom, or are there limits to it? This tension continues to drive political and ethical debates to this day. Key philosophical views on freedom. Negative freedom versus positive freedom. One of the most important distinctions in the philosophy of freedom is between negative freedom and positive freedom. Let's break these down. Negative freedom, coined by philosopher Isaiah Berlin, refers to the absence of external interference or constraints. It's the idea that freedom means being left alone to live your life as you choose. For example, you're free when no one is forcing you to do something against your will. But there's a twist. Positive freedom goes a step further. It's not just about being left alone. It's about having the ability and resources to fully realize your potential. Berlin described it as the freedom to control your own life and achieve self-mastery. Think of it this way. You might be free to speak your mind, but are you truly free if you don't have the resources or education to understand and express complex ideas? Positive freedom means having the opportunity to make real choices, not just the legal freedom to choose. Freedom and free will. A huge part of the freedom debate is the idea of free will. Are we truly free to make our own decisions, or is everything determined by forces outside our control? Philosophers like Immanuel Kant believed that true freedom comes from acting in accordance with rational moral principles. For Kant, freedom is the ability to make ethical choices that align with universal moral laws. But there's also the argument from determinism, which suggests that every action we take is the result of past events and conditions, meaning our freedom is an illusion. Then there are existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre, who claimed that freedom is both a gift and a burden. Sartre believed that humans are condemned to be free, meaning we are responsible for all of our choices, and this responsibility often leads to anxiety. But this existential freedom allows us to create our own essence and meaning in life, independent of societal expectations. Freedom and responsibility. The interconnection of freedom and responsibility. As we dive into the philosophy of freedom, it's impossible to ignore the strong connection between freedom and responsibility. Think about it. Freedom means we have the ability to choose, but we also have to take responsibility for the consequences of those choices. For example, Jean-Paul Sartre argued that when we make decisions, we are not just choosing for ourselves, we are choosing for all of humanity. Each choice reflects a universal principle that others might follow. This brings a profound weight to our freedom. It's not just about making decisions for our own benefit. In political philosophy, freedom isn't just about individual rights. It's about social responsibility. John Stuart Mill argued that individual freedom should only be limited when one person's actions harm others. Mill's harm principle suggests that while we have the right to do what we want, we also have a duty to ensure our actions do not infringe on the well-being of others. Freedom comes with a cost. It's not just the right to do whatever we like. It's also about acknowledging that our actions affect the world around us. This is why freedom and responsibility are inseparable. Freedom in society. In any society, freedom is always in tension with social order. The social contract theory, introduced by philosophers like Thomas Hobbes and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, suggests that we give up some of our individual freedoms to live peacefully in a society. Hobbes famously described life without social order as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. He believed that without government, humans would be in a constant state of chaos, so we surrender some of our freedoms to have security. Rousseau took a more optimistic view, arguing that we only lose our natural freedom to gain civil freedom, which benefits everyone in the community. Economic freedom and inequality. In a capitalist society, economic freedom is a major aspect of personal liberty. The free market allows individuals to make choices about their careers, investments, and purchases. But, as we see today, economic freedom is often intertwined with economic inequality. Is it really freedom when only a small percentage of people control the wealth and resources? Think about how unequal access to education, healthcare, and opportunities restricts the freedoms of those who are disadvantaged. For many, the freedom to act is limited by external factors like poverty, lack of education, or discrimination. Freedom and technology. In our digital age, the concept of freedom is rapidly changing. With the rise of social media, surveillance, and mass data collection, our freedoms are increasingly monitored. We might be able to express ourselves freely on social media, but are we truly free when companies and governments track our every move? The question becomes, do we trade some of our freedom for convenience? By agreeing to terms of service, we allow corporations to gather vast amounts of personal information. This compromises our privacy and raises questions about the balance between personal freedom and security in the digital age. We've explored the deep philosophical layers of freedom, from its historical roots in ancient Greece to its evolution during the Enlightenment and the modern-day implications of freedom in politics, economics, and technology. We've seen how freedom is not just about the absence of restraint, but about choice, responsibility, and the collective good. As we continue to navigate these complex times, one thing is clear. The philosophy of freedom is more relevant today than ever. But what does true freedom look like in our interconnected world? Is it about having choices, or is it about living in alignment with our values? If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the philosophy of freedom, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What does freedom mean to you? And how do you think it should be balanced with responsibility in society? Let's continue this conversation together.